Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including the Jim Parisi Show and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today as I continue to stretch the lineage of music and actually reach out to my peers this year more than any other year that I've been doing my show. My guest today is a woman who has just continued to expand the vocabulary of melodic improvisation. She's classically trained, but has become, at some point, became obsessed with transcribing long improvisational solos from the jam tour, the jam circuit, that the lineage that traces back to the Grateful Dead, and then obviously on to Fish and different amalgamations that take place today. Holly Bowling, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Do you feel, Holly, do you feel liberated? What is the most liberating thing about where you are in your career right now? Because, I just want to make sure that, I wonder about whether when you go on tour, if it's, oh yeah, this cat, she's playing cover tunes, she's playing Dead cover tunes, she's playing Fish cover tunes. But no, I mean, are you liberated, and what are you doing that's unique?
I mean, I feel pretty liberated when I'm playing. I think you hit on it. It's, the stuff that I'm arranging is music of Fish and the Grateful Dead originally, for sure. And so in that sense, sure, I'm covering ground that they've already laid the pathwork for there. But, the most interesting stuff to me comes in the spaces in between. And that's really, I think, where I feel most liberated and where all the interesting stuff happens. I feel that way when I'm seeing a Fish show. I'm not going to hear the songs. I'm going to hear what they're going to do in the interim after they kind of launch off into exploration. And when I'm playing, that's the space that's most interesting for me, and that I'm really looking to make something happen in. So am I covering their music? Yes. Is there a lot of me in there and a lot of space to go other places? Absolutely. And I think lately, more and more, I'm interested in the stuff happening in between the touch points where I bring it back to familiar stuff that people know, and trying to spend as much time out there in the ether as possible before coming back to Earth.
Can you talk about your physical body and the metaphysical part of music? I spend a lot of time on my show focusing with the cats on the metaphysical. Obviously, you were classically trained, probably got bored to death at some point, and then became enlightened towards improvisation. But can you talk about when you go off and you go fishing and you go off into space, that process of actually leaving your physical body?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when you mentioned I probably got bored at classical. I didn't get bored with the music so much as the trappings around it were a little off-putting for me, and there was a little too much structure and adherence to tradition, which at a certain point becomes restrictive. When you talk about metaphysical and music, for me, there's a space that I'm chasing, and I've experienced it once when I was playing classical music, and I've experienced it a ton playing improvisatory music in general, and it's the same feeling that I chase after when I go to a Fish show, for example. All these different pathways of getting there, to me, it just doesn't really matter how you're finding it. We're all going after that same feeling. And it's honestly, for me, the closest thing to a religious experience that I think I've ever had. And it's that moment when I'm completely absorbed in that moment and being carried by the music, and everything else falls away. And I'm not sure what it is that we're getting close to in that moment, but whatever it is, getting closer to that source is what I'm chasing. I think some people get to it outside of music too. Maybe people get to it through meditation or other pathways that are not really my wheelhouse, but I think we all know that feeling, what we're looking for. And for me, music is just the easiest path to get there.
When can you talk about when you got off on the one time in classical music, what that was like?
Yeah. I was actually a competition, which is weird because usually that's the time.
Yeah, you're normally pretty
things are-
stressed out. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and usually there is a certain amount of nerves there, which can definitely get in the way.
Mm.
And I was playing a Beethoven sonata, the Waldstein sonata, and it's one of my favorite works. And at a certain point, somewhere through this really long piece, I stopped worrying and being nervous and thinking about the notes, and it was just kind of like I held the reins and jumped on the horse, like I wasn't the one running anymore. I was just trying to like hang on and ride this thing, and it was just this beautiful feeling of letting it all flow, and it was amazing. Like it was like one of those really good dreams where you wake up and you're like, oh man, wow. That was incredible. And I walked off, and I knew I nailed it, and I ended up winning the competition, but I didn't even care about that. It was an honor, but it's also just that feeling walking out of there being like, man, that's where it's at. Like all those hours of practice, you're doing it so that you can have that effortless experience where something just carries you out of yourself. And so that was really the first time I felt it playing, and now I've learned to tap into that feeling when I improvise. I think it's just a practice thing. You open that door as much as possible, and it starts to stay open more than a crack, or it's easier to open it each time.
Talking to Holly Bowling here on the Jake Feinberg Show, having a ball. So I want to just read you this quote. I interviewed this percussionist, Mtume, over the weekend. He was played with Miles Davis in the 70s, and he said that Miles told me a story about Charlie Parker. Miles had just gotten with Charlie, and they went to Chicago, and the piano player didn't show up. And there's always musicians in the audience. Some guy raised his hand and said, "Bird, I know all your songs." And so Bird said, "Well, come up and play, man." And they started playing, and when it was time for Miles' solo, he looked over at Bird and said, "Yo, Bird, the cat's playing the wrong changes." And Bird said, "Well, play them with him, and then they won't be wrong." And and I, with the Dead, I am stuck in a loop. I admire you a lot in the sense that, I never got on the Fish wagon, and that's okay. But I'm obsessed, and I'm in this loop with the Grateful Dead, specifically from the early 80s. I can't stop listening. It's been like that for many, many years. And that to me is like, just riff on that idea of, because a lot of times I feel like they're playing the wrong changes, but everybody plays it with them. So then they're right. Right. And so it's like, and so I'm just trying to get at this idea of saying, and it sounds so good, and it makes me feel good, even though it's not perfect. Where within the classical realm, not only are you taking a directive normally from a conductor, but there's this like, built-in thing about, you said adherence to tradition. I also say it's about something about perfection. And there's something about playing improvisational music where you don't know what's going to come off your fingertips next, that relates to this quote by Mtume about Bird and Miles, and I just wanted you to riff on that.
Yeah, you're right. With classical music, there's an obsession with accuracy.
Obsession. It's an obsession.
Yeah, and it can become stifling, and it can be a little bit like it can be a straitjacket kind of. I think it can hamper you, and it's something that I think a lot of classical musicians, if they move into other realms, kind of struggle with, and struggle to shake that off. I hear you about the wrong notes, though. I just, one of my things, sometimes it's intentional if I'm feeling stuck for ideas, and sometimes it's just something that happens. I play with my eyes closed a lot, either because the music sweeps me away, or if I'm stuck in a rut, I'll close my eyes. And, there's a lot of muscle memory and playing by feel that you can remain fairly accurate. But if you really get into it and you start making some big jumps around on the keyboard, you're going to miss a note. And I like to do that as an exercise, not to go, oh man, I hit something that was a half step off and that sounds really dissonant. That instead of feeling like it was wrong, I like to go and, play it 3 more times and then have that be the pivot point that sends things in a new direction. And so it's almost like introducing a little element of chance intentionally so that, you're not just stuck in your own same patterns, using a quote unquote wrong note as a new direction,
Well, that's what I think that's what my show is about. It's stream of consciousness, but it's also going off in new directions. I mean, can you talk about a recent example on the bandstand when you did hit a wrong note, but then it took you into the ethos? It took you off into a different stratosphere?
Sure. I mean, I couldn't recall a specific date for you. I'm very bad at keeping track.
No, I mean, just something that resonated with you recently that you can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I was just playing. I remember I was playing a bass line in my left hand. I tend to get pretty melodic, and sometimes that means that what I'm intending to do isn't what comes out. And
right.
Yeah, it ended up taking something from like a build to a really blissful peak into more of a tension-filled, dissonant jam, and that's something I've been trying to introduce more in my playing. Really, like trying to break out of some of the same tonal patterns that I find myself in, and moments like that really push you outside your boundaries a little bit, and I think it makes the really blissful spots and the major key bits stand out in starker relief when you've got some darker stuff that precedes it. So I'm thankful for the wrong notes in that way. They're really the right notes.
Yeah, no, I mean, dissidence is so important. How have you, like, can I just ask you about, I mean, I see a lot of these clips. We came in with Slipknot, you playing that jam, and but I see you in the solo setting a lot. How comfortable are you integrating other cats into this conceptual, this improvisational concept that you have developed? How easy is it, or do you prefer to fly solo on this stuff?
I really like both, and I'm really grateful that I have opportunities for both in my life right now. Playing solo is awesome because you are in complete control, right? Which is also a lot of responsibility because there's no one to cover you and there's nowhere to hide, and it's just you up there. There's no one else to introduce ideas or riff off of. Like it's both good and bad, but it's also cool because if you want to modulate or switch into a new mode or whatever you want, you don't have to wait. You don't have to hint at it and wait for the rest of the band to follow you. You can just prepare it and then make the leap, which is really cool. But at the same time, when you play with other people, it's nice to throw an idea out there and have it become a conversation rather than talking to yourself up there.
Right. I mean, who are the cats that can hang with you? Because I mean, this stuff is, I mean, aside from your original tunes, but then you're doing, like you said, you basically didn't go to Fish So's for the songs. You went there for when they would go off.
Well, that's true and not true. I mean, I love their compositions, and the thing that originally hooked me on Fish was the really intricate compositions. It's just that when you become very familiar with the repertoire, after a while, the thing that's new and different and keeps you coming back is the improvisation. Right. And, I love the compositions. And I would say I'm not, the stuff that I'm doing that's very arranged, the composed sections of the pieces, those aren't really suited the way I'm doing them to play with other people because I'm trying to incorporate all the parts. And so bringing other people in, I would need to subtract some of what I put in there. But the improvisation part, I mean, that's always the more people you add to that and the more different voices you can add to that, that's very interesting to me.
Can you I just wanted you to talk also about who the best leader was that you ever worked with. And my show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and I wanted to ask you what you think, who the best leader was you worked under, and what were some of the nuanced qualities of leadership that you think are important on the bandstand in 2016?
Oh, man. Well,
we can come back if you want.
I guess I'm very much living in the present right now, and two recent experiences I've had playing with other people. One was sitting in with American Babies, Tom Hamilton's band, a few weeks back. And he's a great band leader. puts out a lot of energy, and everyone was on board. It helps when you have a great band behind you too. But that was a ton of fun, and then I got to play with Phil Lesh a couple days ago, and it's not that he was leading things, but just his presence. I think everyone up there playing that day, everyone felt listened to, everyone felt in control, and at least this was my experience. I think everyone felt this way, and everyone was equally contributing, and there didn't even have to be one person in control at the helm, and yet it all flowed, and it didn't feel directionless. It felt like it worked. And anytime someone brings that kind of presence to the stage, it's an experience.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by stage presence, and I actually think that in many ways, the Grateful Dead, especially with those bills at the Fillmore with Miles Davis, they were heavily impressioned by the idea of not just playing the music, but also the actual stage presence. But I mean, can you talk specifically about what that presence feels like? I mean, is he making eye contact with you all the time? How do you know that everybody's listening?
Well, I mean, you can hear it in what's coming out of the instruments, right? There's communication visually there, and then there's communication what's coming out of your instrument. Yeah, I mean, there's eye contact and smiles, and then there's not needing to make too much eye contact. If you're really locked in, there's no evil glances being shot from one side of the stage to the other. Like, come on, man.
Right. When did you start actually? I mean, your bio suggests that you were inspired at this Phish show, but can you talk about your career, when your career actually started as a professional musician?
It's taken a lot of different directions for me. I started touring around this solo piano Phish and Grateful Dead project about 2 years ago, and before that, I had gigged locally in San Francisco for a bit, and I was kind of at a point where I was figuring out where I wanted to go with things. I wasn't out on the road, and I was kind of searching for what am I going to do in my life right now, next, and right as this question was kind of bubbling to the surface for me, this Tahoe Tweezer project I'd been working on got a lot of attention and just kind of started snowballing. So it was kind of an organic thing that just happened at the right time and really took off when it was the right moment.
I think it's important in this time period, unlike when we had a record industry, like when you say snowballing and got momentum, how does it work? I think it's inspiring. Number one, how do you even live in San Francisco? Number two, the other thing is, how does something snowball to the point where you become an individual? I mean, the cats that, whether it's Ahmad Jamal or whether it's, Dave Brubeck or, all 500 people that I've interviewed, their identities came from records, pictures on records, liner notes, and obviously a very heavy touring circuit, prolific touring circuit. None of that really exists today unless you can, like you said, get momentum. Break it down. What does that mean? How did it gain momentum?
Well, I think at the heart of it all is still heavy touring. I think that's both how you build your career and also just continue to make yourself grow as a musician. And ideally as a human being. Being out on the road playing a lot, it forces you to play better, and it puts you through some trying situations, and it's very.
But I guess what I'm saying is
it's very intense living.
Yeah. No, and we can get into. I meant when you were sitting there pondering your next life move. What does that mean? It started to resonate. What were the things that happened that got you to the point where it was like, here's Holly Bowling, we got her on tour. Now you can actually get on the bandstand and fall down, but you got to actually have momentum first. So, how did it explain the bubbling process, explain the idea of becoming an individual in 2000 in this century?
Yeah, it's really funny. I didn't enter into this idea for the solo piano Phish thing with like this grand scheme of, hey, you know, what would really be like a great move here, and a radio friendly, you know, media play
Right.
would be to transcribe the Tahoe tweezer and arrange it for solo piano. I mean, it's a pretty, it's kind of a nerdy proposition.
No, I mean, it's
definitely
it's a wonkish,
only
it's very
appeals-
wonkish kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it appeals to a very small subset. But I wasn't doing it for that reason. I mean, when I say that I was kind of deciding what to do and this ended up being the next move, it wasn't like a premeditated thing or a conscious decision. I was working on it because I love this music really deeply, and I need projects to work on. And, you know, I worked on it for a year with no intention of ever even playing it for anyone else. I was just doing it to do it. And when it was done, my husband convinced me to record it and put it up online. Because he's like, you know, other people will be into this. You shouldn't keep it to yourself. And so I did without really expecting it to go anywhere. And that turned into, you know, more attention than I would have expected, and the opportunity to record an album and then tour around it. And then, you know, when I saw the door open to go tour doing solo piano and explore the music that I really love on a whole different level, you know, I just, at that point, I made a conscious decision to go after it with everything that I've got. But it didn't come out of a desire of going, now how could I make a career here? How could I get my foot in the door? It was just something I was doing because I loved it.
Well, absolutely. You know, and that ultimately is, I mean, did you ever contemplate, what were the options you were contemplating at that time? I mean, did you ever consider actually becoming some kind of, 9-to-5er, or was it all, were you always just going to be an artist?
No, I wasn't contemplating a 9-to-5, but I was debating going back to school, honestly. You know, I've always had a little bit of a, if I get bored, I'm always looking for something new to intellectually stimulate me, and whether I was going to go back for, you know, a master's in music or really go after something else altogether. I was just looking for something new to push myself. And then it kind of appeared as a surprise.
Right. It's a big surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, like, can you talk a little bit about, being on the bandstand, a time when, you just in general, where do you see yourself at this point with the tools that you have in your toolbox? Where do you still want to grow? I mean, I don't think it's chops. I mean, you have pretty nasty chops. I mean, is it stage presence? Is it as an entertainer? Is it being able to, connect with the audience? I mean, where are these things that you still want to fine tune as an onstage performer?
You know, I'm really excited in the coming year to put a band together and start leading my own project. I mean, I'm leading my own solo project, but it's just me up there, so that doesn't really count.
No, I think that's really interesting. I mean, go riff on that, because I was trying to get at that before with the idea of this, what you're doing is with these improvisational things. I mean, do you want to put a band together around what you're doing right now?
No, I really want to take it in a different direction. I mean, I would say it would be most influenced by the stuff I'm doing between the songs that people know. You know, like at this point, I'm stretching out the spaces between further and further and really enjoying exploring that space. And I'd love to explore it with some other voices in the mix and see how that plays out. And I don't have a clear idea of all the things that I'm going to go after in the next, 2 or 3 years, but I'm very happy with that not being clearly defined right now, because there's a lot of different avenues I'd like to walk down, and I'm psyched to not have to be stuck in one particular place,
Well, yeah, no, I mean, if you had some desires, I mean, is Holly Bowling, like, are you looking at, violins and mandocellos and maybe a modified trap set? I mean, what's the instrumentation in a group? Is it untraditional? Is it straight? Is it quintet? I mean, like, to me, this is like, the musical world is your oyster at this point.
I think my thing right now is small ensembles, because the more people you have on board, even though you can get such interesting timbral possibilities, it's just, it makes it harder to go further out there in some senses, So like I just did a all improvised duo set with Al Smith, who's the drummer for American Babies.
What's his name? What's his name?
Fest.
What's his name?
Al Smith.
Al Smith. Okay.
Yeah, so we did it was a super last minute thing. They were like, "Oh, we have an open spot. You want to put a band together?" And I had around 2 hours to throw something together. So I called Al, and he came over, and we just did an all improvised set, so just keys and drums. And I think throwing a bass player into the mix would be nice, so I'm not tied down to the low end and all the stuff you can fill in on the top at the same time. But I like the freedom of a small group. I think it makes the music really nimble. You can turn quickly and go in new directions, and that's the really open-ended stuff is really interesting to me.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out why you won't get on the Hammond B3 and start kicking pedals. I mean, that would be a cool thing to do.
Well,
I mean, that was the hippest thing back in the in the '60s when the B3 came into the nightclub. It was just, you had organ drums, and that sonically, I mean, it's really about stretching people's ears, and how did you even can you talk about your first experience of going to a Phish show? I mean, how did you even wind up? I don't know. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 32.
Okay, so I'm 38. Why don't you talk about the first time? I mean, how you even got into the Phish milieu?
I got into Phish during the first hiatus, and I never thought I'd see them live. I thought it was one more band that I discovered too late, and but I still dove into their catalog and learned a lot of the songs, and was just really, really into their music. And then when they announced the New Year's shows in 2002 and Hampton 2003, those were my first shows. So it's kind of a weird experience, your first one. For it to be that insane energy of all these people welcoming back their favorite band that they'd been missing. It was pretty intense first one. And then I was hooked, and I ended up seeing all but 4 shows between the hiatus and the breakup. So at that point I was 18 and I was all in.
Right. No, I mean, I've been to Phish shows before. I never did see the Grateful Dead, but I mean, when you got off on that Lake Tahoe show, were psychedelics involved?
No, I was at that show entirely sober, and I'm so glad that I was.
Yeah, I'm glad too. Because I don't know. I mean, yeah, go ahead. So you were sober, and then you just were like a bird in flight when you heard that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, if it's going to be a musical experience like that, there's no way to know in advance. But if you could know in advance, I would always go into those experiences without any kind of influence. It's just something between you and the music in some cases. Like, nothing against it, and there's times when it works, but. Man, I had a friend say to me after that show something along the lines of, "Oh man, I wish I had, done this or that before that show." And I was like, "Really? I'm so glad that none of that was involved." It's just like, I have crystal clear memories of the show, and the experience of being able to leave a concert or a musical experience and you're on another planet and you feel high, and it's just purely like an altered state as a result of what the music did to you. That to me is the coolest thing. Like, you're literally on another plane. And especially when you're there, and so are a bunch of the other people that just shared that same experience with you. It's this really cool energy that I've never experienced it anywhere else. I just think it's the coolest thing.
Oh, I think we're starting to cook now with Holly. I mean, I was so fascinated watching this. The way you broke down Lost Sailor on this video clip today. Can you talk? Are there differences between Weir compositions and Garcia compositions? I mean, are Weir compositions harder? I mean, could you talk about the difference?
No, I don't think they're harder or easier. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. They're the same.
Each one of the songs I've worked on has such a different character and personality to me. I have a hard time making generalizations about them based on who wrote them. They're each one is really different, and I've taken each one of them in a different direction. So I have a hard time lumping them together.
Do you find that just with your upcoming shows, can you set the stage for how many sets there will be? Is it do you sing at all? And just break down what it looks like. I'm still just sort of getting my head around Holly Bowling.
Yeah, so I almost always do 2-set shows. Once in a while, if it's a pre-show for something or something along those lines, we'll just do 1 set. But it's almost always 2 sets. And I do sing, but not in this context. So when I'm doing these shows, it's solo piano, Fish, and the Dead. It's entirely instrumental, and it's unprocessed piano. There's no effects. There's no other keyboards, and no singing. It's just trying to convey this whole universe and world in one very stripped down setting. With that said, I do alter the sound of the piano sometimes with extended techniques and stuff. So if I have access to a acoustic piano, I'll get inside of it, and I like to get in there with timpani mallets and pluck the strings. And I have something called a wand that's kind of like an ebow for piano. That's a handheld thing that'll just get the strings vibrating, so you can sustain the notes indefinitely.
Oh, I dig that.
And it almost sounds like a sine tone, and you can. You get the sound without any of the attacks. You can kind of control the envelope of the sound. And I really like to get these extended, unexpected timbres out of the piano because it's in such a stripped down setting. People aren't expecting that. And you can kind of blow people's minds with, whoa, all that stuff came out of the piano. We're used to hearing it in one context. And I'm a big fan of pulling unexpected sounds out of instruments.
I dig. No, I mean, to me, it's like you should be doing a whole set of Space, Before I let you go, my show is predicated on love, and I just wanted you to talk about your concept of love and how you bring love to the world.
Honestly, I think, I have a lot of people tell me that my shows make them cry. And at first I felt bad about that. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that's really the point. It's music is about expression of emotion, and it's also about connection. It's human to human connection, whether it's music that was written 400 years ago that resonates with someone now across space and time, which is really an incredible thing, or whether it's, 2 total strangers in a room who never say 2 words to each other, but you make that emotional connection between you through the music that you're playing and that they're listening to. And that to me is just such a purely human thing, and just at the core of who we are and how we connect with each other. And I'm not sure if it's how I would define love, but it's certainly closely tied together.
And it's not manipulated in any way.
No, I mean, I think if you're playing not for ego, but you're playing for the right reasons, what you're doing is reaching out, non-verbally. You're reaching out and trying to make that connection with the other people in the room or who hear it down the line. And anytime we can extend that web between us, that's a good thing in my book.
Well, Holly, we riffed here, but as you move forward in your progression and some clarity begins to develop with your sonic power trio down the road next year, I'd love to have you back on the program.
Absolutely, that would be a real treat.
All right, Holly, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Jake.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Just heard from Holly Bowling, a tremendous piano player steeped in the classical tradition, but pivoted out of that after a cathartic, sober experience at a Fish show, and is better off for it. As you can tell, she's obviously pretty high-end intellectual person, but is able to let those emotions flow on the bandstand and expand the web of love that we are all trying to do in our own way. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back tomorrow. For now, we'll rejoin the Jim Parisi program.
the aerosol cans of room freshener. And I think that's a perfect picture of election 2016. You know,
Let me ask you, Pastor Fred. Well, who was your candidate going into the primaries?